In this video, we're going to go over Part B of the Groovy Google Sheets Histograms activity. This will show you how to make relative histograms. So if you want to make a relative histogram, which means your y-axis would be percentages or decimals rather than absolute frequencies, you have to make your own frequency table. There's no shortcut as there was in Part A. So we're going to use the relative histogram sheet. So down here, make sure you're on the relative histogram sheet. And the data shows exam marks of 1,000 students. So to start with, we're going to make a frequency table. So frequency tables are needed to make non-traditional histograms. So that would be relative histograms or cumulative histograms. To make frequency tables, you have to make a list of the upper bounds of each bucket and then use a frequency formula, which we will show you in these steps. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you sort your data into ascending order so you know what your minimum and maximum are. The data already is in ascending order, but if it's not, I'm going to show you how to do it. The easiest way is to use this step right here. And what you would do is click on the column, and then from the data menu, you're going to click on sort range. And if your data shows what the variable is in the first row, which is exam mark, you have to click this. Data has header row, because you want that tells the Google Sheets that you're not going to sort cell 1, you're just going to sort everything from below it. A to Z means you're going from lowest to highest. Z to A, even though they're numbers, means you're going from highest to lowest. And then you would press sort. So nothing happens because they already are in ascending order, but if they weren't, that's how you would do it. Now, in cell C1, what you're going to do is type in the bucket upper limits. You're not actually going to type in the full buckets right yet. Now, in our histograms, we want to include 5 to 10 buckets of equal size. So you have to decide what the width of each bucket would be. Would you go 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, etc.? That would give us too many buckets. So we're going to use 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, all the way up to 90 to 100. That would give us 10 buckets, which is within our 5 to 10 range. You could also do your bucket width of 20, but we're going to do it by tens. Now the other thing is we're going to go 0 included in the first bucket up to 10, but not included. And then 10 is included in the second bucket up to 20, which is not included in the second bucket. So in this case, basically, if there is a number on the boundary such as 10, we do not want it included in the first bucket, we want it included in the second bucket. And then if there's a number 20, we don't want to include it in the 10 to 20 range, we want to include it in the 20 to 30 range. So this is where it gets a little confusing. So what we're doing here in the buckets is we are only entering the upper bound of each bucket. So we're only entering what the higher number is. The problem here is if your bucket boundaries overlap, such as 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc., a piece of data, which is called a datum, on the boundary overlap, such as 20, would be put into the lower bucket. So if we made this as 10, that would mean any number up to and including 10 would be put into the lower bucket. We don't want it to be put into the lower bucket, we want to put it into the higher bucket. So we can't say that the upper bound of the first is 10. What we'd have to do is say that the upper bound of the first bucket is like 9.99. And that's what this is saying here. Because our upper bound is non-inclusive, which means we are not including 10 or 20 or 30 in the upper bound, you have to type in 9.99. So that is meaning that the first bucket will include everything up to but not including 10. Because if you type in 10, that would do everything up to and including 10, which we don't want here. So if you wanted 10 in the upper bucket, which means the second bucket, and not in the first bucket, you have to type in 9. But because we have decimals, we'd have to type in like 9.99. Because if you just typed in 9, then if you had 9.5, it wouldn't include it. So this would actually be, 9.9 or 9.99 or something like that. All right, so our second bucket, you're going to type in the upper limit as 19.99. Now that does not include everything up to and including 19.99. It includes everything over 9.99, which would mean including 10, up to, but not including 20. And then you can keep typing this in, 29.99, 30.99, etc., all the way up to 99.99, but that can get a little annoying. So what you would do is type in the first two numbers, then highlight those two cells, and then you're going to fill it down to C11. And then the sequence of numbers will autofill for you. But you have to make sure you type in the first two. You can't just type in 1. Now the last thing you have to do is this one, we do want to include 100, so you would just change this to 100. So I just want to go over this again because this is where a lot of people will make mistakes. When you start this off, you do not type in the full bucket. You don't type in 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. You type in the upper ranges. If you type in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc., then any number that is on the boundary, such as 10, would be included in the lower bucket. If you want to include it into the upper bucket, instead of typing in 10, 20, 30, you type in 9.99, 19.99, 20.99, because this would indicate anything from 0 up to but not including 10. This would indicate anything from 10 up to but not including 20. So please remember that. Please do not type these in initially. We will type these in later so that they look like actual buckets when we make the graph. Next is we're going to let Google Sheets calculate the frequencies for us. We're not going to go, oh, there's one number from 0 up to but not including 10, and then type in 1 ourselves. And then there's this many numbers up to but not including 20. We're not going to count those ourselves. We're going to let Google do it for us. So in cell D1, you're going to type in frequency. And in cell D2, you're going to type in the following formula. Equals frequency, and then an open bracket. Then you're going to highlight all the cells from A2 to A1001. The easiest way to do that, rather than scrolling, is to click on the A2, then click on the control, and when you click on these, you got to click and hold. So click and hold control, click and hold shift, and then click the down arrow, and it will highlight all of the data for you. Now, one thing you have to be careful of is if any row is missing data, this will not go all the way to the end. It will only go until there's a space. So you have to make sure you include all the data. You could highlight all the data if you wanted to. This is just a bit of a shortcut. Then you're going to press the comma button. So the first thing that you highlight will be where the data is, then the comma. Then you're going to highlight the cells that have your upper ranges. So now we're going to highlight all of our upper bounds. And then close it off. So your frequency formula, the first part that you highlight would be your data. The second part you highlight would be your upper bounds. And when you press enter, it's going to give you all of the frequencies. So there's one number from 0 up to but not including 10. There's 17 numbers from 10 up to but not including 20. 29 numbers from 20 up to but not including 30. Now, this 0 in cell D12 just gives you the frequency of anything over 100. And if it's not 0, then this maximum is not the correct maximum, and then you're going to have to add a bucket max at the bottom. So you'd have to add another bucket down here. Now the next thing you're going to do in cell D13 is you're going to add up all of the frequencies, because we're going to have to make these relative frequencies. So to make them relative frequencies, we're going to have to take each of these and divide it by the total number of frequencies. So to calculate the sum, it's equals sum bracket, and then highlight all of the frequencies, and there's that 1,000 pieces of data. Now, in cell E1, we're going to have our exam marks. This is now where we're going to write down what the buckets actually are. So the first bucket is going to be, so a square bracket, so including 0 up to 10, and then a round bracket saying up to 10 but not including 10. And then the second bucket would be square bracket 10, so we're including 10, and then up to 20, and then a round bracket to say we're not including 20. Now unfortunately we can't just highlight these two and then drag them down. You're going to have to type in each one individually. So the next one would be square bracket 20 is included, up to 30, round bracket, so we're not including 30. And then square bracket 30 up to, not including 40, so that gets a round bracket. Then 40 up to, but not including 50. 50 up to, but not including 60. 60 up to, but not including 70. And keep going. And the last one would be 90 up to, but in this case we are counting 100 just to finish it off, so there would be a square bracket at 100. So these are the buckets that you're actually going to see on the graph. So we're not actually going to see these numbers on the graph, we're going to see these on the x-axis of the graph. Now, to calculate the relative frequencies, so that will be starting in F1. In F2, you're going to type in this formula. You're going to type in equals, click D2, so there's 1 in the range of 0 to 100, divided by cell D13, which is the frequency. But now we have to make that an absolute reference. So you're either going to press the F4 button or the function F4 button to put the dollar signs around the D and the dollar signs around the 13 to make it an absolute reference, and then press enter. Then you're going to click on that cell, and at that square you'll get the crosshairs and fill it down to cell F11. And it's going to calculate the relative frequencies for each of these numbers. So it's going to take 17 divided by 1,000, and then 29 divided by 1,000. So you can see here, because we made D13 absolute reference, as we fill down, this changes to D3, D4, D5, D6, etc. But we always want this to say stay D13. So the first number changes to represent the frequency, but the second number that you're dividing it by is an absolute cell reference, so it always stays as 1000. Now, to make the histogram, you're actually going to have to do something different than you did in the previous activity. Google won't create a histogram where you calculate the frequencies yourself. So if you were just making a histogram like this, you just highlight A and then go into Insert Chart and make a histogram, then that will work, but there's no way of changing these to relative frequencies. So if you are making a relative frequency or a cumulative frequency histogram, you have to make your own frequency table, and then you can't create a histogram using the histogram chart. What we're going to do is what is called an area chart. So what we're going to do is highlight cells E1 to F11. So E1 to F11, because in column E, this is what's going to go on the x-axis, and in column F, this is what's going to go on the y-axis. Then from the Insert menu, you're going to select Chart. So Insert, Chart. And this is not what we want. We don't want a bar chart, so we're going to change it. What we're going to do is to create a stepped chart, stepped area chart. So we're going to go on the Chart Type tab, and there are different area charts. This is an area chart, stacked area, 100% stacked area. We want the stepped area chart. Make sure you don't do stacked stepped. That's what some people do. Make sure you don't do just area chart. You want stepped area chart. And when you click on this, you get something that looks a little bit more like a histogram. So you no longer see the spaces in between the bars, although the bars just kind of look like they're flowing into each other. That's about as best as we can do. Along the x-axis, you have the intervals. Along the y-axis, you have the relative frequencies. And now there's just a few formatting things that we can do. So first of all, we should add the units to the x-axis title. So the units for the exam mark are percents. So under Customize, under Chart, Axis, and Titles, you're going to put horizontal axis title, and you're going to add in the units. If there is a legend showing, you can remove it. There's no legend showing here, but this is how you remove it, if you remember from the last part. Now, sometimes these intervals get squished looking, so what you can do is slant them. So if you go under the horizontal axis tab, and then you go under slant labels, you can slant them a bit. That might allow you some more room. And something else you can do under series, if you go to area opacity, you can change that to 100 to make it look darker. So that would be what your relative frequency graph would look like.